Over these past few months, I've been sharing some of my research and creative work with the world. Thanks to digital communication channels, artificial intelligence tools that enable swift translation, and the power of the pixel in the virtual image, my work has reached a far wider audience than I could ever have imagined. A consequence has been that most recently my eyes have not been supervising the direction of my scribe or a file, and my hands have not been forming much metal on my jewelry bench, but I've been firmly immersed in the digital world, with movements limited to my hands' frantic sweeping across my laptop keyboard, trying to share perhaps a digital representation of my identity and my work. It really made me reflect on my human-computer interactions and the immaterial and material of the digital world. A lot of jewelry designers are no stranger to shifting between the digital and physical, both for the creation of work and the communication of work. And there are companies and researchers, practitioners out there that question and advance these practices, considering craft thinking in the context of digital experience and asking what it means to be human in an increasingly layered physical and digital world. On one of my social media platforms, I connected with Lynne Craig, who is an innovation director, academic, and founder of Computational Adornment. Her work, research, and practice connects design, technology, education, and business development, exploring the frontiers of emergent technologies and cultural change. To talk to me today about her work and what it means to be a digitally conscious maker-thinker, I'm excited to welcome Lynne.
Thank you. Thanks, Sophie, for having me.
So to start, Lynne, could you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do?
Certainly. So, my name is Lynne Craig. I currently examine futures to wear, and I'm particularly interested in how the future we wear might be driven by technology, which is what I've centered my practice on in the last number of years, and using language that I've now developed to describe my practice as computational adornment, which is something where I like to play between really creative spaces and terms and really complex spaces and environments. And so that seemed to be a suitable alignment. But my work really weaves new narrative threads for human computer interaction, HCI, and human robot interaction, HRI. And in doing the work that I'm looking at the moment, I ultimately like to kind of spark change and explore different ways in which these physical and immaterial worlds can connect to our physical and data selves.
So you gained a BA in jewelry and proceeded to study an MA at the Royal College of Art. What drew you to study jewelry initially?
I've always made things. I've always made jewellery specifically. I've always been interested in how we can create new things to wear. It's just been something that I've really enjoyed playing with in a diversity of materials, diversity of approaches, practices, methods. And the prospect of jewellery as a BA really appealed to me because it also connected interests in drawing, in designing, and in a trade, in a skill that I could hone and learn. And I guess I really appreciated that connection of elements.
Today, you are really considered a leading voice on innovation, spearheading a practice that explores the frontiers of these emergent technologies and what cultural change they influence. How did your career path unfold in this direction? And do you think your jewelry interest background has influenced your choices or the way you think?
Absolutely. Jewellery is fundamentally about most of the things I do and approach, although it may not look like that. So my practice really is about, as I said, computational adornment, how we use technology and data to dress and adorn our bodies. And that comes from a really knowing position of materials, crafting, making, using physical manufacturing capabilities to create things. But way back in 2007, I started a research project that looked at the future of jewellery retail. And that was a research project with Birmingham City University and the Jewellery Industry Innovation Centre. And that was really emergent at a time when CAD was starting to become interesting to the sector. And so really I spent a long period of time trying to investigate what the point of CAD in the jewellery sector was, how we could harness it beyond a manufacturing output. So how does these technologies and tools enable us to wear jewellery in new ways? And in doing so, we developed technologies through computer vision and computer science techniques that allow you to try on product online in real time. And really that's been I got lost for over a decade in virtual environments and didn't make things, stopped making physical things because I was so involved in crafting digital artifacts. And it was really fascinating to me how similar the process of crafting digital experiences and physical artifacts was. And I really enjoyed playing with that for a very long time. But I got to the point where I really wanted to understand actually this is changing how, as humans, we interact with product. The product is immaterial. It doesn't exist. It only exists in a pixel. And I can't take it with me. I can't pass it on. That kind of human experience of jewellery being a kind of talismanic presence in our kind of extended histories of our lives for generations didn't feature in this new kind of computational landscape. And I was really interested in what the virtual presentation of jewellery was doing to our digital selves. So the development of the work really mirrored the development of social media. We launched pre-Instagram quite a long time ago. And YouTube was very, very new. In fact, we were one of the kind of very beginning commercial projects to kind of be amazed that 40,000 people, I remember the figure, 40,000 people had watched this video on virtual products that we'd created. And at the time, that was just staggering. But it was incredibly interesting time. And really what I'm starting to do now is link that back into the physical production of things and embed the technology into those things themselves. So how can we have smart, intelligent, autonomous artifacts or computationally adornment enabled objects? And so from a robotics, new materials, sustainable materials, thinking about how we engage the things we wear and embed those with the technology without a screen is something that I'm currently focused on.
Maybe looking back at that period of where you co-founded Holition in 2009, really pioneering, I would say, that it wasn't done much before, augmented reality for this, global market for global retail brands. And then you also worked for London College of Fashion, launching the Digital Anthropology Lab, where students and researchers experimented with wearables, AR, VR, smart materials, and other emergent digital technologies. Could you share a little bit about each of these ventures and why you think it's important that artists are engaging with these technologies?
I mean, when I started the company called Holition, we spun out of a 50-year-old jewellery company in Hatton Garden. And we connected with an emergent startup looking at augmented reality. And at the time, nobody really knew what the application space was for this type of technology. And so the ability to try on product, not just in a flat two-dimensional screen, but around the body and occlude the body in those real-time visualization spaces that we developed was a really important pioneering space of computer vision. So it puts the person, the body in the scene. You're no longer a layer, you are part of a three-dimensional environment. And I think that really was quite revolutionary at the time. And certainly the jewellery industry, which was where myself, my co-founders and board came from. And we had very successful global commercial deployments enabling those fine jewellery brands to allow their customers to engage with product that perhaps traditionally they may never have done for all sorts of reasons. And so it allowed, through digital technology, more people to engage with high value jewellery artifacts and engage with brands in new distributed ways, which was incredibly interesting. And I guess I was completely fascinated by this space of my knowledge of jewellery, why we wear jewellery, the importance of jewellery, and that mirroring in this emergent social world of the screen, and why actually the benefit of having a photograph of you simply wearing that product in this social realm was almost as valuable as you going to Place Vendôme in Paris and buying the thing. And to me, that was a really interesting pivoting point around our social relationship with technology in online environments, and how we have different abilities to present different selves in different environments. And that really, those kind of outstanding questions led me to establish the Digital Anthropology Lab at University of the Arts London, London College of Fashion, looking at connecting that digital sense of ourselves back into perhaps more wider understandings of adornment. So launching in the jewellery and hard luxury sector, as we did within Hallucian, it really was the fashion industry that wanted it and had compelling reasons and investment spaces to move into it. But at the time, the technology simply wasn't able to process the information in the right way. So we kind of hit a technical blocker. We weren't able to have the right technology that allowed us to deliver our hard objects in the same way as deployable, physical, soft garment structures. Although we did do that for a number of brands. But I really wanted to take some time and kind of get back into understanding, why are we doing this? What does it mean? And really, how does it potentially start to reconnect back into a physical and making practice? So I set up a research environment that allowed us to experiment with very, again, emergent forms of technology, looking at the Internet of Fashion things. How do our technologies be embedded into our garments? How do we consider our body and our fashions as screens? How do we think about the surfaces that I was unable to kind of create in a computer science environment? How do we rethink them in a physical way to have digital properties? So there was a really kind of interesting circling backwards and forwards with on and offline physical immaterial practices, looking at programmable matter. How do we program artifacts to move, shift, and shape change? And we created all sorts of strange prototypes and provocations in that space. And really, that was a really important time to drive forwards questions around what we want technology to do in and of the body, and how do we want to start to analyze or understand the future opportunities here. Because you could look at my kind of career trajectory in many different ways, but I'm very clear that it's a very linear practice in my head, always moving in the same direction, but it does adopt different methods, tools, and interests along the way. So the Digital Anthropology Lab really was established to look at understanding what it means to be human in a digital world. How are we engaging with the emotional aspect of virtual environments and the emotional aspect of physical objects that move, that we can wear, that connect with each other in different ways?
Those kinds of questions, it's important that artists are asking them, isn't it? Like our skill sets and our way of thinking through potentially making and can add value to that conversation.
If artists don't drive these narratives, the outputs will not be aligned to culture. They won't be aligned to how we engage with each other. They won't be able to be developed to have impact on the human experience in such a way. I didn't invent augmented reality, absolutely not, but I did create a landscape by which we can contain what augmented reality can do in a new way, which allows people to engage with technologies differently. Again, I didn't invent physical computing, but I'm trying to find a way of engaging the human experience within that, and the questions that we're able to offer as designers of the body to languages and landscapes of robotics, and again, computer science engineering, how we shift what narratives those spaces create for impact of these research environments is hugely important for artists to drive.
Today, you are the co-director of entrepreneurship and innovation in the Edinburgh Futures Institute. So, what is catching your interest at this moment in time? What are the emergent technologies or challenges we as artists could or should be engaging with?
So, my work with Edinburgh Futures Institute really is landscaping diverse, multidisciplinary, and transdisciplinary approaches, which is working with industry in different fields together to create the conditions that enables different academics, public policy, businesses to work together to create change. So, how we are developing those infrastructures that enable that to happen across a very kind of more traditional research environment is something that I'm really fascinated by at the moment. In what way can we create environments that roboticists meet flax farmers, meet jewelers, meet strategists looking at the green spend in your consumer purse? How are we stitching new narratives together to shape and advance what we want of our future world? And so part of the work that I'm involved in as the Futures Institute is establishing the Futures Fabrication Forum, which we're looking at the future of our made and manufactured world and driving actors and those within our ecosystem to engage with designing data and innovation to wear. So we held our first event in June. We brought a wonderful collection of practitioners together, from regenerative leadership with the Jewellery to looking at the data and the body, AI and farming with Sabine Seymour, to looking at engineering principles of necro-robotics and bio-inspired engineering, to flax farming and X innovation. So all these areas to me seem entirely normal to stitch together, but I appreciate that it is somewhat of a jump. In fact, I think I've observed that that's what my practice does.
Yes, I agree. I think there's definitely a jumping between and sort of questioning why there's even a barrier between or gaps between these disciplines.
Yes.
So you refer to some of your work as computational adornment. Could you maybe give us a few practical examples of some projects that you've worked on that you feel illustrate this term?
I guess it's taken me a while to come to that kind of terminology, that language of computational adornment. But if I reflect back on all of my projects, even from going way back to the RCA when I was one of the first people in that 3D printing lab, using a machine that was £250,000. I remember it. I remember the lift had to be taken out and rechanged in order to get this massive machine in. And it, instead of pixels, it printed in dust. And nobody knew what that was. Nobody knew what it was going to do. And it was used predominantly as a model making space. But I didn't see that. I saw it as a final object. So I was creating jewellery from dust and creating all sorts of creative body adornment spaces that was 3D printed from dust. And that's, I guess, where it started. If I then track that next piece of computational environment, would creating it jewellery in augmented reality. So how do we wear jewellery that is not physical, that is digital in form? And again, I would definitely describe that as computationally adornment. And then I guess moving to the work in Digital Anthropology Lab, where we looked at the Internet of Fashion Things and programmable matter. So how we created environments where we could develop artifacts to wear that spoke to each other or spoke to your own body and your own emotions. So again, that is using technology in an environment of adornment, of wearing. And also recently working with the Business of Fashion, Textiles and Technologies Creative Cluster, funded by UKRI, where I was leading an R&D project with Dr. Shama Rahman and a company called Away to Mars. And we developed a AI-enabled fashion environment that allowed you to co-create with AI in a real-time environment using proprietary images as a data set. So these kind of words and terminologies are slightly more common now, but we kind of pioneered this work in 2019. It took us a long time to develop. But again, that allows you to play with the idea of adorning yourselves in garments that you have co-created with AI. And moving now to the work that I'm doing within design informatics in my role here, looking at fashion informatics, so where the data and the fashion and body align, and also design robotics. So how do we enable and enhance robotics thinking and processes with design and our material knowledge combined? So I guess tracking all of that as a trajectory, it did kind of seem to fit. Computational adornment is the space that I am building.
There was one dress that I saw you talk about previously that had data projected on a garment, live data that was changing from refugees.
That was a project I brought together with Professor Helen Story from London College of Fashion and Halisham. And they created a data visualization project, a real-time projection mapping onto this fabulous garment that Professor Helen Story had developed. And really, it used data to tell the story that Helen was navigating around refugee crisis at the time. But it did it in such a kind of compelling post-screen environment that actually it engages the user in a different way with that information. You know, the body and the way in which we inhabit our bodies and observe other bodies is really plugged into the human condition. So enabling our bodies to be receptors of data or observe the data projected on other bodies in that way really opens up new ways of looking and listening to these data worlds that are all around us, that are changing as we speak. And that relationship between garments color changing in real time in quite a staged theatrical way actually operates as a potential blueprint for the future. So how can our garments themselves be interfaces and caretaking those communication needs, not just from a visual perspective, but perhaps from an assistive perspective or safety perspective or a complex environment perspective. We think of design as a space to navigate the end point of a project, but actually design is often and should be the catalyst for what spaces we can engineer.
You refer to yourself as somewhat of a translator, fluent in language of design, business, even education. And as you mentioned, you developed words vocabulary to unite and ignite like change with them all. Could you share a little bit more about the need for care and consideration of the communication at the intersection of all these various disciplines?
The knowledge that I have translates, on the one hand, in a very generalist setting. You know, I have working knowledge of a very strange grouping of things. But that knowledge is distinctly important in its breadth. And the way in which you can, as a designer, influence what technologies are built, I think is one of the most important futures of our world we can develop together. And I do believe that the language of design and teaching design as a tool for others to make those translating spaces possible is hugely important. You know, design, as I said before, is a space that leverages and can hold all of these different disciplines. The design, the front end, the consumer space, it can hold the manufacturing, the process, the kind of rational delivery of developing a product. And it can also hold the invention and the possibility, which sometimes some of these other spaces lack. So to be a translator of that knowledge is a hugely important pivoting space around how we connect these different disciplines together. And I guess that is a knowledge space that I've honed over many years and worked with, you know, the most creative computer scientists imaginable, more creative than any of my design enabled friends. And I say that in a lovely, kind way. Computer science is a very creative discipline, likewise with engineering and physical computing as well. These spaces are also doing very similar things, but we don't help each other by creating and carving siloed knowledge environments, both in how we educate our future builders of our future worlds and in how we promote and advance research and knowledge in these spaces. So I guess my translation space is a really important environment to start to think about how we describe better our interdisciplinary approaches to our future. Technology is not going away, and we do need terms to grasp and hold on to what we mean by these things, and give importance to those landscapes of people with different knowledge.
All digital technologies, as we know, spark a lot of debate around authenticity, originality, even ethics. What are your thoughts on these subjects today? And do you see any challenges, dangers in using certain digital tools, technologies, perhaps in certain ways?
Ethically, it's challenging. Nobody has the answers yet, and everybody is trying to understand them. But I think it's a really important space that as we're developing technologies, we need to also understand the ethical implications of them, because otherwise the technologies are out there, they're unwieldy, and they're used in challenging circumstance. And we've seen that time and again, if artists, particularly designers as well, don't engage with ways in which we can question, challenge, and interject with some of the ways in which these technologies have potential to be used, then I think we do pose questions to how we deploy technologies in the future. Technology is changing at such a pace. It's in an exponential period of development, and that is not going to get any less fast. So there are challenges, particularly in how we can think about the body in these spaces. Not just the body being adorned, but the body itself and the sense of identity and perception of reality in virtual and augmented experiences, social data and AI created environments. And we do have to be mindful and wary of the origins of how we choose to develop these spaces. But technology is nature, and it's actually, we can't separate the advancing of what is going to happen with the technology space and what we are justly trying to shift and know and learn and understand with that space. And it's hugely complex. This is one of the biggest transdisciplinary kind of landscapes there is in order to navigate both the terminology, the impact, the care, the just and the ethical outputs that we have from these spaces. We're not playing with wearing virtual jewellery online anymore. There's so much more that we can do with these spaces. I think designers have a positive role to play in raising awareness around some of the challenges that these technologies may present. I gave a talk recently on the notion of fake making, and I'm really interested in that kind of generating kind of intentionally preposterous but real fake landscapes. And the talk really looked at the already happenings in this space that we are just adopting as fact, this kind of fake making space. And that is in a kind of provocatively playful tone. But actually there is a strong undercurrent to kind of our fake making our future worlds. How do we keep them tangible? I think it's a really interesting question.
You are interested in reimagining the role of making in design, education, and also business. What making looks like perhaps even tomorrow. If we could fast forward like 50 years, which is a long time, as we say, technology is developing so fast, so we could negotiate the time frame. But what would you like to see in our future in relation to making practices?
I talk about making businesses as new ways of testing ideas and new ways of defining research. Even how we get research into impact quicker is through building businesses, and how do we create the conditions to enable more people to do that is something that I'm really focused on. But from that, the actual physical making process will be much more involved in chemical and biological engineering that designers will engage with. In fact, I don't think even the term designer might exist in that environment. You might just talk something and it will appear. I think our ability to even know what a 50-year trajectory will be blows my mind even, and I always think I'm about 10 years out. So annoyingly, as has been proven again and again, I'm about 10 years, but 50 years, you're taking it quite far here. So I think yes, that kind of role of the designer, I don't know where that will be. I think materiality will be driven again from that kind of dust and pixel landscape, but it will be generated in a way that we are yet to know. And I believe the notion of design will be in a completely distributed environment, that it won't be design, it will just be that's how you engage with the world.
To anyone listening who may be interested in emerging technologies or starting to think about these questions as well, how would you advise they get started? Were there any books that really inspired you, or are there online channels, or what kind of resources would you recommend that perhaps helped you, that could be influential to anyone else?
I guess I've worked with computer scientists for many, many years. Many of the best ones are self-taught. I've run a program here for the last 3.5 years in the Design Informatics Master's program, and we combine our data science students with design students. And together we fuse those knowledge bases to create kind of collaborative outputs. And I guess my advice to those students, as it would be to your question, is to go and do stuff. You can't read books, you just have to do it. You have to learn by doing, and that goes back to the very origins of a making practice. You asked me at the beginning, do I still do jewellery? Yes, jewellery is about learning how to make things. Making with technology is exactly the same. You just have to pick it up, play with it, make your tools, and see where the spaces are that you want to invest your time in. There is so much online. It is a landscape that is advancing so quickly. You just have to get started and make some things with the technology that is freely available. And really, that is my genuine advice.
What are you working on at the moment? Is there anything listeners should keep an eye out for if they want to keep up to date with their work, and where should they follow your progress?
So we're working to develop the Future Fabrications Forum at the moment. That's probably my focus area within the circular environment of our made and future manufactured worlds. I'm also very much examining how we wear robotics. So that is a space that I am developing from a design practice at the moment. And that is ongoing work. Yeah, my website is a good place to drop in.
When I look at my computer setup, feel the cheap plastic of my mouse, and stare at the boring rectangular interface through which I access my digital world, I'm glad my mind will soon be transported via my digital activities which they enable. There is plenty more to discuss about our digital experience, both inside and outside of our virtual realities, from the very real impact the production and disposal of technological devices has on the planet, to human behaviors, both positive and negatives, that manifest themselves online, and to the identity and possibility for makers new tools and technologies both enable and perhaps challenge. Makers need to be part of these discussions and question developing conventions. This is not a simple task, to enable and create these types of spaces, and for her efforts in bridging the gap between these various disciplinary worlds. And for speaking to me today, I would greatly like to thank you, Lynne. It was really a pleasure to hear what you've been working on, and I definitely think that me and my audience will look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you, Sophie. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the chat.
Next month, I'll be joined by another guest, so watch this space to find out who it is. But for now, this was Sophie Boons for the BHA podcast episode titled Computational Adornment with Lynne Craig. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.